Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to look at what could be regarded as a hack to shifting your life. What you will learn is how your self-image plays a much bigger role in the lives that people are living than they think, and that the self-image is much more malleable than most people think, if one just understands how to change it. To embody the version of you who already has the life you want, you must understand a central insight from Psycho-Cybernetics, a book written by Maxwell Maltz, a plastic surgeon who came to realize that people's lives changed not when their faces did, but when their inner self-image shifted. The insight is as follows: you do not act according to who you are. You act according to who you believe you are. And that belief is shaped not by logic or willpower alone, but by the internal image you carry of yourself. That image governs what feels possible, natural, and deserved. So if the life you want feels far away, the first place to look is not at the external conditions around you, but at the self-image operating within you. This image is not a fixed truth, it's a construction. And because it is constructed, it can be reconstructed. The mind is responsive to suggestion, especially when that suggestion is delivered with emotion, repetition, and sensory detail. It does not distinguish clearly between a vividly imagined experience and one that happens in the outside world. That is why imagining a new version of yourself in a way that feels emotionally real begins to rewire how your brain responds to reality. This is important to understand clearly. You can literally rewire your brain into a new version of you if you use the right techniques. This is not about becoming someone you're not. It's first about realizing that the person you thought yourself to be was never a fixed entity and never had much to do with your true, eternal nature. Why is this framed in this type of language? Because in the times that we are living in, as more and more people are waking up to who they truly are, Maltz's work takes on a new meaning. We are realizing that, at the core, we are divine beings with a lot of freedom of choice when it comes to the vessel that we are experiencing physical reality through. Psycho-Cybernetics is not wishful thinking. It is a method for shifting how your internal guidance system operates. Maltz compares this system to a servo mechanism, a goal-seeking mechanism that adjusts and self-corrects based on the target it is given. That target is not just an external aim like a job title or a relationship, it is a sense of self. The kind of person you believe yourself to be sets the coordinates of this mechanism. So when you change the image, you change the entire orientation of your thoughts, behaviors, and even what you unconsciously notice in your environment. While this internal guidance system responds to the self-image you hold, it's important to remember that the self-image is not the real you. It's a mental construct shaped by past impressions, emotional experiences, and repeated suggestions. Maltz is clear that you are not the personality, but the awareness behind it. The purpose of reshaping the self-image isn't to trap yourself in a new identity, but to stop being ruled by an old, inaccurate one. As you rehearse new beliefs and behaviors, you begin to experience yourself differently, not because you've changed who you are, but because you've removed what was never true to begin with. This is important to understand, and you'd be amazed by how easy it is to pass by this part without having understood it properly. And if, on the other hand, you grasp this, and it is the first time you've heard identity and self-image being discussed in this manner, it may just shake the way you view yourself and other people. This is not about trying to find a true self-image that finally defines who you really are. You're learning to use a self-image, a role, a pattern, a frequency, as a tool for functioning in the world. And you use it consciously. You step into it, not because it's the ultimate truth of what you are, but because it serves the life you are choosing to live in accordance with what resonates the most with you. This means, yes, you continue to live a role, but now you do it with awareness. You're not immersed in it because you've forgotten yourself. You're immersed in it because you've chosen it. You're aware that the role is not the whole truth, But you still let it shape your feelings, your actions, your posture, your voice, because that's what makes the internal guidance system operate effectively. With all this in mind, you realize that the old role, the one shaped by fear, trauma, or inherited suggestion, was also just a mask. The difference now is that you're not confusing the mask with who you are. You're the one wearing it, because as long as you are living as a human, you will always be immersed in some kind of role. But now you can put it down or change it at will. So yes, you live the role fully, even knowing it isn't ultimately real. Because functionally, the nervous system responds to what you imagine yourself to be. But existentially, you remain free, not locked into that image, because you know it's just that, an image. Knowing this, you are also free to live out the role as fully as you wish, while not being tied to other people's expectations or your own fixed idea about who you are. Now, to embody the version of you who lives the life you desire, you must first define who that version is. This means more than writing down goals or describing vague traits. It means constructing a coherent inner model of that self. What does this version of you believe? How does this person feel when waking up in the morning? What kind of language is natural when speaking? What choices come easily? What behaviors feel automatic? It's not enough to know what this version of you does. You have to generate the internal sense of being that person, and then begin to act from that place before your outer life has caught up. Maltz emphasizes the power of imagination in this process. Not imagination as escape, but as training, as rehearsal. When you consistently picture yourself as the person you intend to be, and when you add emotional intensity and physical relaxation to that picture, you are installing a new set of instructions in your nervous system. The key is not to imagine success in vague or symbolic ways. The key is to see yourself performing specific behaviors and reacting in ways that are aligned with the identity you're stepping into. For example, if you want to become someone who speaks confidently in public, you don't just imagine yourself being praised or celebrated. You imagine the way you stand. You imagine what it feels like in your body when you speak clearly. You imagine how you respond to mistakes without panic. You make the imagined version real by practicing it in your nervous system over and over until it becomes easier to act from that place than to revert to old patterns. What you've just been given is a blueprint for change. Keep this in the back of your mind, practice it as often as you can, and, crucially, remember it. You need to train your memory to operate from this mindset, as you've been training your mind to allow these processes to run on autopilot for most of your life. There is no need to wait for life to give you permission. That version of you who has the life you want is already a potential pattern in your brain. Your job is not to chase that future version, but to activate it now. To do that, you need to stop reinforcing the identity that conflicts with it. You need to stop imagining failure, humiliation, or unworthiness. You need to stop repeating the inner language that says change is impossible. These habits of thought may feel like reality, but they are just echoes of a self-image you no longer wish to maintain. Changing how you imagine yourself may feel artificial at first. That is expected. But this discomfort is not a sign that it isn't working. It's a sign that you're breaking old loops. The nervous system resists unfamiliar patterns even when they are helpful. This is because most people's brains are geared towards survival and not growth. And survival means staying in what is known. That resistance softens with practice. Each time you visualize yourself responding as your future self would, each time you act in small ways from that identity, you weaken the hold of the outdated image. Now, it's important to remember that the self-image is built not from events, but from interpretations. And interpretations can be rewritten. One of the most effective tools Maltz presents is the idea of mental rehearsal. This involves imagining successful outcomes in advance, not as something to fantasize about, but as something to install in your subconscious system. This builds familiarity with success. It reduces the inner friction that arises when good things begin to happen. It makes progress feel natural. The mind seeks to prove the self-image right. If you see yourself as someone who always fails, you will unconsciously create failure. Not because you want it, but because it fits the internal picture. If you instead train yourself to see through the lens of a new identity, you begin to perceive different possibilities, take different actions, and interpret setbacks differently. That change compounds over time. To live from the frequency of the version of you who already has the life you want, you need to feel what that version of you feels like. You cannot reason your way into a new identity. You must feel it in the body. This is why emotion plays such a central role in the process. Emotional energy fuels the new image. It gives it depth and stickiness. Without emotion, the image remains abstract. With emotion, it begins to embed itself in your physiology. According to Maltz, emotion can be summoned deliberately by combining vivid mental imagery with deep physical relaxation. Remember this because this is important. The nervous system responds strongly to imagined experiences when they are rich in sensory detail and felt in the body as if they were happening now. By relaxing the body and then imagining a specific scene where you are already living as your desired self, you begin to generate the emotional tone that matches that state. The key is to picture not just what is happening, but how it feels to be in it. You can amplify the feeling by noticing posture, breathing, and inner dialogue, all as they would naturally arise in that version of you. The more fully you engage your senses and attention in this imagined scene, the more the emotion follows. Over time, this emotional rehearsal becomes a kind of emotional memory, one you can return to at will, even without the full visualization. There is also a behavioral component. You reinforce the new image not just through imagination, but through aligned action. These actions do not need to be large. What matters is that they are consistent with the new identity. If your future self values health, you take steps toward that, even if small. If your future self is expressive and open, you find opportunities to speak more freely. Each action is a vote for the version of you you're becoming. Over time, these votes build a new sense of self. This is an important part of the process. And in the beginning, it often means overriding the pull of the old self and the temptation to fall back into familiar habits. That resistance doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It simply means you're operating outside the range of what your nervous system is used to. To make the shift sustainable, it's essential to find a way of acting that fits you. Not an idealized version of transformation, but a rhythm that your current system can handle. Even if it's technically possible to go from being shy to speaking in front of thousands, that leap is unlikely to hold if it feels overwhelming. What does work is meeting yourself where you are and moving from there in ways that feel slightly unfamiliar but still manageable. You don't perform the whole identity at once. You take small, deliberate steps that affirm the new image. And those steps become the foundation of something real. Not because they are dramatic, but because they are chosen. Another point that Maltz returns to is the idea that the mechanism of success does not require constant conscious direction. Once the new image is installed and reinforced through visualization and action, the system begins to operate automatically. You no longer need to push yourself to be the new self. You simply are. Remember that while you are installing the new self-image, you are not lying to yourself. You are teaching yourself how to feel safe in that state. The nervous system must learn that success, confidence, peace, or expression are safe to hold. Many have been conditioned to expect tension and failure. Even success can feel threatening to a system that is used to struggle. So the work is not only to visualize success, but to allow it, to relax into it, to feel at ease in it. As mentioned, relaxation is a critical part of the Psycho-Cybernetics method. Maltz insists that tension blocks the mechanism. When you are tight, reactive, or desperate, the system malfunctions. When you are relaxed, you allow the new image to guide your responses with more ease. This is why daily relaxation practice is essential. It calms the critical mind and opens the subconscious to suggestion. In a relaxed state, the imagined self can sink deeper. It becomes more than a thought. It becomes a lived experience, even if only in the mind at first. The version of you who has the life you want is not waiting in the future. That version exists as a pattern you can activate in the present. But activation requires clarity. It requires choosing a new self-image and refusing to feed the old one. The brain will still offer the familiar thoughts. The body will still echo old emotions. But you do not have to identify with them. Each time you choose the new image, you make it stronger. Each time you act in alignment with it, you carve a new path in your neurology. In summary, this is how real change happens. Not through self-punishment or endless striving, but through alignment, through repetition, through emotional energy, through choosing to relate to yourself differently than before. You begin to notice the space between who you've been and who you're starting to become. And that space doesn't close by chasing outcomes or waiting for life to catch up. It closes when you rehearse the internal state of your chosen identity until it becomes more familiar than the old one ever was. This is not about waiting for permission. It's not about waiting for proof. The change does not begin out there. It begins with how you choose to feel, to see, and to carry yourself now. The outer changes, when they come, are simply reflections. That's the essence of Psycho-Cybernetics. Change the internal image, and the mechanism will do the rest. Life begins to organize around the version of you that you've already started to become on the inside. And here is what may be the most liberating part of all. You can choose what kind of life to live by choosing who you are willing to be. You can be more than your past, more than your default habits, more than what anyone, including yourself, once believed you were. But for that to happen, you have to treat the process as real. Not like a nice idea, but like a new operating system. You're not pretending, you're tuning. You're adjusting your entire internal system to resonate with the frequency of the life you want, and then living from there. It takes patience and it takes practice. But maybe for a shorter time than most imagine. And it brings with it a kind of freedom that no performance can match. You are no longer driven by your old loops. You are no longer at the mercy of an outdated sense of self. You are free to choose a new image and live into it. Not just once, but again and again, until it becomes who you are. And still, even as you live from this new identity, remember what Maltz gently reminded. The self-image is not the truth of who you are. It's a useful interface, a navigational tool, a pattern you wear, not a definition of your essence. And because you are still living a human life, you will always be living through some kind of role. That's not a flaw. That's how the system works. You don't need to resist it or constantly monitor yourself. You just need to remember, quietly and without force, that none of it is fixed, and that you can step out of what no longer fits. This awareness will come and go. That's natural. Immersion in the role is part of the experience here. But with practice, a deeper clarity begins to hold. You cultivate the habit of observing yourself, not harshly, but with softness. You become less attached to the old stories, less reactive to the familiar thoughts, and more willing to let go of what no longer feels like you. That is enough. And finally, if what you've heard here feels familiar, like something you've known before but perhaps forgotten, you're not imagining it. These teachings echo through many voices. Neville Goddard, Joe Dispenza, and others who speak about inner alignment, imagined identity, and the way consciousness shapes form. If you'd like to delve deeper into those perspectives, we've created playlists that continue where this video leaves off. You'll find them linked on the end screen right now. You've now reached the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for your time.